All right, so I was the mystery reader at Willdale Elementary about a month or so ago. So we had to give the classroom, clues of who we were, and I had actually kind of forgot that I was signed up to do it. It was on a Friday, and we had to give them 5 clues. And the night before, we were having dinner, and David said to me, he says, "Daddy, you're the mystery reader, aren't you?" Nah, it's not me. He says, two sons. You're a soccer coach. You got a black car, a big black dog. 2 languages that no one speaks anymore. Yeah, I think it's you. I'm like, no, it's not me. I think it's Clark's dad. And he thought about it for a second and says, "Clark's dog died." I go, "I'm sorry to hear about that." So I get there and I start reading, and after the reading, I didn't know there's this little question and answer session, and eventually the question came, what do you do for a living, or what's your job? And I said, I'm a pastor. And then one of the little kids, he says, well, what do you do during the week? And I was like, there's a lot of people that wonder that. But that was a really interesting day for me. I remember the day was a Friday. I remember we had some snow that week because the kids missed a couple days of school. I remember that morning I went and visited a baby in the hospital that was 24 hours old. You just yeah, 24, not 14 months. And later that day as well, I visited a man who was in his 80s, who's probably going to die in the next few months. It was really interesting to think about that. Here's this innocent, beautiful, perfect baby. Here are all these kind of innocent, kind of perfect, 8, 9-year-olds, and here's this 80-some-year-old guy that his months are numbered. He's not going to live much longer. And one of the things I talked to him about, and I talked to a lot of people about this, in their last years, they'll say, Craig, it's not the things that I messed up on, and I've gotten over that. And we do. You get by your mistakes. We make it through the things we would have done differently. But what this man, what other people tell me is this haunting phrase that I want to eradicate from our vocabulary this morning. The phrase that goes something like, "I wish I would have." Our biggest regrets in life are not going to be the mistakes that we made. Our biggest regrets in life are going to be the opportunities that we did not take. I've observed that. I've even experienced it, in my own life. Now, what Jesus did is he finished strong. And what I want all of us to think about this morning is, what does it look like for us to finish strong? Jesus, there was no regrets when he died. When Jesus died, he didn't say, "I wish I would have." When Jesus died, his last 3 words are, "It is finished." Jesus finished strong. Jesus finished well. And my hope for all of us is when we get to the last of our days, that we can say, "It is finished. I finished strong. I finished well." So here, you guys know the story. We've been talking about this for the last 5 or 6 weeks. The creation here was abusing the Creator. Now, they would have put a crown of thorns on his head. So outside my front door at my house, I have these 3 rose bushes that we planted 10 years ago. And every summer, we have to clip off the roses so the new ones can grow. And every so often, I stub my little thumb, with one of those thorns, and it hurts, doesn't it? You've done that before. Now, can you imagine all these great big thorns wrapped in this crown and just shoved on your head? That was part of creation, abusing the Creator. Jesus was whipped dozens of times. One account says it was 39 times. One person said it was so bad you could actually see some of his internal organs. It was creation abusing the Creator. He was on a cross, probably just a little bit bigger than that, a little bit sturdier. There would have been spikes through both of his hands, and a spike through one of his heels to hold him on the cross. What this was humanity at our worst and God at his best. So Jesus, when all this was going on, he was up on the cross. In the first week, we looked at that phrase. He said, Father, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing. Now, for every single one of us, this is powerful, good news. That here, the Creator forgives creation. There was a man who was right next to Jesus. There was two of them, actually, one on each side. And one of them, he would have had to done something terrible. To be executed on a cross, it was the cruelest form of execution. You would have had to do something awful to somebody or somebody's. Most people did not die this way. The worst of the worst died this way. And he asked Jesus, he said, Jesus, will you remember me in your kingdom? And Jesus looked at him and said, surely you'll be with me in paradise forever. Now again, this is powerful good news for us. If Jesus treats this hardened criminal who comes to faith at the last moment like this, how is he going to treat all of us? There is none of us, not a single one of us, that has done something so bad that we fall outside of the hand of our loving God. His grace is available and it is sufficient for each of us. Now, this is the exact same text we read last week with one addition on the end. I am thirsty, the one we looked at last week, that was the second to last phrase that Jesus spoke. The one we're about to hear again is the last phrase that he spoke. So in verse 28, John chapter 19, Jesus knew that his mission was now finished. And to fulfill Scripture, he said, I am thirsty. So it's important to know here that Jesus, he wasn't looking for wine. He wasn't looking for water. Jesus here is in the last 30 to 45 seconds of his life. What Jesus was looking for here is to finish strong. He was looking to complete the mission that was given to him. Because there's a prophecy in the Old Testament that said that they took wine and they put it against his lips. So Jesus said, I'm thirsty. And in verse 29, a jar of sour wine. So don't think of the good stuff you get at the restaurant. Think of some sour vinegar that's been left out in the sun too long. A jar of sour wine was sitting there, so they soaked it, a sponge in it, and they put it in a hyssop branch, which would have been probably 3 or 4 feet long, and they held it to his lips. Now, this was not a kind and compassionate thing to do to a dying man. This was a humiliating, disgraceful thing to do to a dying man. Have you ever had a cut and you put alcohol in the cut? That's what happened here. It would have been one more way, one more time to humiliate Jesus. It's like the beating wasn't enough, so we're going to do this one more time. Then in verse 30, when Jesus had tasted it, he said, it is finished. Now these were his last words. What happens next is then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. He was hanging on the cross and he could hang no longer. Everything had been completed, everything had been fulfilled. And he died at that point. Now, the Greek word here for is finished. We have 3 English words that we use, but it's just one Greek word. It's a phrase. So Jesus would have said tetelestai. You're going to see it up on the screen. And what this means when Jesus says, I am finished, it means to complete, to discharge a debt, to execute. So when Jesus said, it is finished, when he said tetelestai, it doesn't mean I'm dead. It means, I've completed my task. The debt has been paid in full. The plan that God had is now executed and it's complete. When Jesus says it is finished, that's what he means. Now, there's a number of ways that this is used in the Greek language, and I want us to cover these because it's going to be important to understand the context here that Jesus says tetelestai. Number one, it means that this is like a servant returning to the master, I have finished. So oftentimes here, landowners would have servants, gives the servant a task to do. The servant goes out and does the task. He comes back to the master and he would say, tetelestai, I'm done. I've picked those olives. I'm done. I've cleaned up that field. Tetelestai, I have done what you have asked me to do. Now the second way that would have been used is it's like a merchant declaring, okay, everything here is paid in full. So if someone would have went to the market and they were buying some spices or some cloth, whatever they were buying, they would give not dollars but denarii as the currency they would have used. And Like, you give me this cloth, here's these 5 denarii. Tetelestai, this transaction is complete. It's been paid in full. I owe you nothing. And then the third and final way that we find it used is a priest examining a lamb for sacrifice. So back here before Jesus, who's the Lamb of God, the farmers would bring in, the landowners would bring in their best lambs to sacrifice them on behalf of the people. Now, they couldn't just give the worst lambs or the defective lambs. They would have to give the best ones. And the priests, they would have known what these lambs looked like. So the priest would look at the lamb. He'd look at the landowner. And if the lamb was perfect, if it was good, if it was pure, he would say, Tetelestai. The Lamb of God has been given for the sins of the people. So it was at that moment, when Jesus bowed his head, that history changed. History, whether you believe in this stuff or not, history changed that moment. There's more than 2 billion of us here today. 1/3 of the world's population follow the man that said, it is finished. And because of him doing his work on our behalf, not because of what we've done, but because of what he has done, your sin has been forgiven. His grace becomes more real to us. His love is now fully revealed. So it's finished. This is really, really good news. But I think the issue that we have, his work is done. It is finished. The problem is that many of us are not living as if God's work is finished. Many of us are living with unfinished business. I want to go to Revelation chapter 3, verses 1 through 2, and we're going to look at what it means for us to finish strong. So at the end of our days, we're not saying, I wish I would have. At the end of our days, there's not all these regrets. But at the end of our days, we can say something like Tetelestai. It's done. It's complete. I've finished the task that God has given me. I know your works. In verse 1, it says, you have the reputation of being alive, but you're dead. Can you leave that up there just for a second? Has anyone ever gotten an angry text message or an angry email? Anybody? Anybody ever sent one? Yeah. So can you imagine getting this one? You're hearing from someone hoping to be uplifted, and I know your works, you have a reputation for being alive, but you're dead. Not the most uplifting thing you're going to read. So in verse 2, he continues, wake up. So for any of us who have unfinished business, this is for us. Wake up and strengthen what remains. And it's about, and strengthen what remains, and about what is to die. For I have not found your works complete in the sight of my God. Now think about this, our works are not complete in the sight of our God. Our work is not finished, ours is not. Here's an example. So say if, I think I'm probably talking to a few people here. Say you have this inward self. You're the only person that knows this self. You know your hopes, you know your dreams, you know your fears, you know your anxieties, you know your limitations, you know your potential. You're the one that knows that. Now, we also all have this outward persona that we give to other people. Now, for how many of us is this outward persona the exact same as our inward character? Most of us try to be a little bit different than we actually are on the inside, right? Now, if this gap gets to be too big, you're going to start running into these things called stress and anxiety. Because it's hard to be this person and have everybody else believe that you're this person. It's hard to be this person and make everyone else believe that you're this person. So maybe the unfinished business for some of us is to grow this authentic self that we are, and then to be authentic and let other people see this self that we're becoming, to close that gap. Now, I want you to think about some unfinished business that you have in your life. Think about that right now. What is some unfinished business that you have? What is something that you wish you could do that you haven't done yet? If you could change 1 or 2 things about yourself, if you could change 1 or 2 things about your life situation, what would that be? Now, for some, maybe it's adopting a child. For some of us, I can't believe it would be possible with this many people here this morning that there's not some type of relational dysfunction that exists. For some, it might be that we have to forgive somebody. For some, it might be that we have to receive God's forgiveness. For some, it might be getting out of debt. For some, it might be breaking the stranglehold that this addiction has on us. For some, you might be in the place right now where you can start to leave a legacy, where you can leave the world a lot better place than what you found it. For some, it might be doing your part in healing your marriage. For some, it might be spending a lot of time with your kids who are about ready to go to college in the next few years. For some, I think for some, you're probably thinking, I wish I was closer to God. I really do. Most people seem to get it. The people in my small group seem to get it. The person next to me seems to get it. But I look at this world and it's a mess, and I wonder where God fits in all of it. I have questions that have never been answered. I have doubts and fears that God doesn't seem to be doing anything about. And we wish that we were closer to God, and maybe that's our unfinished business. Now, Jesus, he finished strong. He finished well. Now, I want you to know that today is a gift. Tomorrow, Monday, is a gift. The next day after that, Tuesday, is a gift. Every day is a gift to help us take the next step to finishing strong and finishing well, so that we don't live our life with regret. We don't live our life saying, I wonder what would have happened, or I wish I would have, but so that we can start to say, Tetelestai, it is finished. It is complete. I'm becoming who God wants me to be. So here's what we can learn from Jesus. There's just 2 steps, and neither of them are hard. You don't even have to write these down. The first one is commitment. You are not going to change or grow or develop unless there's commitment. It's just not going to happen. Did anyone have bacon and eggs for breakfast this morning? I know it's kind of not the cool thing anymore, but any bacon and eggs people? So think about the breakfast you had, okay? The chicken was involved. It laid the egg. Now, the pig was committed. That's where you get the bacon from. And bacon is greater than eggs, so commitment is greater than involvement. If you want something great in life, you got to be committed to do it. So in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 11, here Paul writes to us, now finish the work so that your eager willingness, let me just pause there. Has anyone ever been eagerly willing to do something before? Are you just so excited? Anybody, you just, oh man, this is the new thing, I got to do it. And it may or may not have worked out that well. Now finish the work so that your eager willingness to do it might be matched with your completion of it according to your means. So say if you want to lose weight. This is not going to happen without commitment. Now you can be eagerly willing. Oh man, I saw that person. I wish I could wear those clothes, or I wish I felt better again. Now that's the eager willingness. The commitment is when you're in the grocery store and you pass the triple stuffed Oreos, and you don't stop and put 3 of them in your cart and eat a whole row before you get home. The stuff isn't going to happen without commitment. There's a missionary, he was from the UK in the 1800s. His name was Horatio Smith. And he took 12 people from London by ship to a Pacific island where they were going to win this island for Jesus Christ. So when he got there, 11 of the 12 hated it. They all wanted to leave. It was a nightmare. The luxuries that they had even in the 1800s back in London were non-existent in the island. The island people were not friendly to them. The climate was different. Nothing was working out, and they complained all the time that they wanted to go back. So you know what he did? He burned the ship. That was no longer an option. From that time, everybody was committed. And I think that there's a lot of us this morning that need to burn our ships. We got this safety net that we're using as a hammock. We need to stop doing this. We need to burn our ship. Jesus, he burned a ship. We find this in Luke chapter 22, verse 42. This is a conversation that Jesus would have had in the Garden of Gethsemane with God himself. And he said, Father, if you're willing, take this cup from me. Jesus knew what was going to happen. Jesus knew that he was going to take the beating of his life. He knew that he was going to have to climb this steep hill with a cross on his back. He knew that he was going to hang on a cross, and he was going to struggle, and he was going to suffer. And Jesus asked his dad, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done. What Jesus did there is he burned the boat. He's like, this is going to happen. I don't want it to happen. It's your will that it happens, so it's going to happen. The boat's gone. We're moving forward. Now, the second step, step number 1, be committed. Step number 2, take the next step. Then you're done. Now, you're going to have to repeat step number 2 a lot, but that's what you do, is you take the next step. So when Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, he did not beam himself up to the top of Golgotha to the end of his life. There was a lot of intermediate steps that had to be taken. Now, I know many successful people in life, and I can tell you that almost every single one of them, it was a painful journey to get there. That journey was combined of a bunch of next steps. I think the reason why we don't complete things, in fact, I know the reason why we don't complete things, is the task in front of us is just too daunting. It's too big. We see our destination way over on the other side, and we don't want to do the work that it's going to take to get there. Yet people do this all the time. Greatness, faithfulness, charity, all these things, anything that matters in life is going to be taken because of a bunch of next steps. Now, what's your next step? You thought of some of those things, right? Like relational dysfunction, financial freedom, spiritual growth. You've thought about what's your next step? Maybe for some of you, you just got to make a phone call and say, hey, there's something going on with us, right? And the only thing I want to do is I just want to sit down, and I want to listen to you, and I want to try to understand you. Are you willing to do that? For some of you, if it's a financial thing, you're still spending more money than you're making. You're going the wrong way. Like, man, this is going to mess you. It's going to catch up to you. The next step is just cutting up those credit cards and saying, as of today, we're going to burn this boat. And we're going to live actually below our means. And we're going to pay off some of this debt that we've incurred. And we're going to start to experience contentment and peace in our financial life. For some of us, if you hate your job, don't spend the next 20 years there. Life is too short for that. Maybe your next step is creating a resume and starting to make some phone calls and exploring some education or getting some whatever it is. Your next step is the next step that you take. You take a bunch of these next steps, and you're going to get to where you want to be and where God wants you to be. Jesus, he did it this way. It's how it started for him in the Garden of Gethsemane. He knew that the next 7 miles for him was going to be brutal. But it didn't stop him. He took the first step. The people on the side of the road, they were humiliating him, and he just kept on walking. He kept on taking the next step. Pretty soon they started beating him up. They started whipping him. They started putting the crown of thorns on his head, and he kept taking the next step. Finally, he got to the bottom of the hill, at the bottom of Golgotha, which is the hill that he died on. In the Greek, it means skull. A very fitting name for a hill where they executed people. And at this point, Jesus, who was already brutally beaten up, he took a cross like that. It probably weighed between 80 and 100 pounds. He put it on his back, and he took the next step up the hill so that our sin can be forgiven. And then what he had to do is he had to claw his way up that steep hill all the way to the top. He didn't take an escalator. He didn't take an elevator. He was God. He didn't beam himself up there. He took a series of next steps. They pounded his feet and his hands to the cross. The guy who was right next to him asked for his forgiveness. Jesus took the next step, and he did it. Jesus took the next step when he says, take that vinegar, put it on my lips. I'm going to fulfill this prophecy. I'm going to take the next step. Then at the end, when it was done, Jesus didn't say, I got all these regrets. He didn't say, I wish I would have. He didn't say, I wonder what would have been if I would have. Jesus said, Tetelestai. It's done. It's over. It's complete. Everything has been paid in full. His death gives us life. His pain gives us forgiveness. Grace becomes real. And I was thinking about how to share this with you, this next step thing. And I thought the best way to do it would be to tell a story every one of you is familiar with if you've been here for a while. Like 9 years ago, like we started this church. Um, it has not always been easy for us. Sometimes it's been very difficult. There's been seasons where we couldn't do anything wrong and life was good and easy, and there's been seasons where we've just struggled. You know, I think like we've worshiped probably about 450 times. This stage right here has been set up like 450 times. Do you know how heavy this bad boy is? And it weighs a ton. And weekly, our guys have come in and taken the next step. They show up early. They stay late. You know, it's an amazing thing to me. Like AJ and I, we've been doing this together for 9 years. I can't tell you how many hundreds of songs he would have had to learn. You know, Barry Anderson, who plays the keyboards, he's a volunteer. He's been with us since week 3. You know, I can't tell you how many times he would have hauled his keyboard in and out of here. You know, the kids, you know, we can kind of hear them if you listen closely enough. And all these kids, like you've held the babies, you've taught the kids, you've invested in their future. You know, this is not an easy thing to do in rented facilities, but you do it. Like, you know, we've stood outside stores and collected over 120,000 pounds of food for hungry people in Omaha. Now, you've gotten some rejection, haven't you? But you've also collected a lot of food for a lot of hungry people. Nowadays, we take mission trips to places like Uganda and Belize, and there's been some of you who have given up thousands of dollars. Some of you have given up tens of thousands of dollars to bring the gospel to hurting people. I was thinking, like, with our land stuff, like, it's never been easy for us. I remember, like, are you familiar with the farm at 180th and Harrison Street? So I actually met the person that owns that property at that house back in 2009. This was a man who was in his 80s at the time. He actually grew up on that farm. He showed me around this house that has been in his family for 8 decades. Now, we paid a couple $1,000s. We had the property appraised. Back then, the market was in a big slump. We figured it was going to be the best time to buy it. So we had it appraised at like $800,000, and I offered him $1 million for it. I said, depending upon our financing and our capital campaign, we'll pay you above the appraised value. He looked at me and he laughed and said, this property is worth $2.5 million. Little discrepancy. He still owns the land too, by the way. He hasn't got his money yet. Yeah, we bought the property. We had to shift things around. Yeah, I know, like with our building team, for those of you on this team, thank you. Like I remember last year, like we left a meeting thinking it's never going to be possible enough for us to build a building big enough for us that we can afford. You know, you left that meeting and you were discouraged. I was discouraged. I was thinking there's no way this is going to happen. You know, when our capital campaign consultant, who's a good man, many of you know him, you work with him, he's spoken here before. He said, Craig, you know, I've talked to your people, I've looked at your financial records, there's no way you can raise this much money. I remember I would lay awake at night just praying and dreaming that this could actually happen. And it did. Because you all get this. You know what it's like to take the next steps. You've seen this happen over the last 9 years. Now, I think of a place, the goal of the church is not to build a building. The goal of the church is to be God to the world, and a building can help us do that. You know, I think of a man named Naaman who had leprosy. You know, this hideous disease, and this prophet told him to go dip himself into the Jordan River at the water's edge 7 times and he would be healed. So Naaman found healing at the water's edge. I think of another man named Jacob who was going back to reclaim his land and be with his brother Esau. And it was God who wrestled him at the water's edge of the Jabbok River. And it was God who changed Jacob's name to Israel at the water's edge. And I think of all the people that will come to this place and get their name changed, from sinner to forgiven, from despair to hopeful. You know, then I think of another man, Jesus, who walked into the Jordan River to be baptized by a guy named John. And at that time, God's life was imparted fully to Jesus. And I think of all the people who will be baptized at the water's edge and receive new life that is offered through him. You know, that's the way this works. This happens in the church. You've seen it happen. It will continue to happen. It will happen more than it's ever happened before. But this can happen in your life as well. Think about that unfinished business you have. 2 things. Be committed. Take the next step. Take the next step after that, take the next step after that, and pretty soon you'll be able to say, Tetelestai. It is finished, it's complete. Friends, no more regrets. No more I wish I would have or I wonder if. Let's move to completion. So Jesus was actually at the point where he was getting ready to start the journey. It was the night before that. And he was sharing a meal with his 12 disciples. Jesus, he took the bread, he blessed it, he gave thanks, and said, friends, this is my body that is given for you. When you eat of this, do so in remembrance of me. Hear those words, do so in remembrance of me. What I want us to remember about Jesus this morning, what I want us to remember about him is that he had no regrets. He didn't say, I wonder what would have been, or I wish I would have. He was committed. He took a series of next steps. And at the end of his days, he said, Tetelestai, it is done, it is finished, it is complete. And likewise, later in the meal, Jesus took the wine, he blessed it, he gave thanks, and said, friends, this is my blood. It's the blood of the new covenant that has been poured out for you in the forgiveness of your sins. When you drink of this, do so in remembrance of me. What I want you to remember about this is that Jesus, his work is complete. The criminal on the cross, the people who crucified him, they were all forgiven. He prayed for it. He gave it. And I don't want any one of us to leave here this morning without considering and accepting and starting to walk down that path of God forgiving us. I think there's way too many of us that are carrying burdens that God just simply does not intend for us to carry anymore. He has forgiven us. Let us live as people who are forgiven. So let's pray.